welcome to a lecture on the rise of a mass democracy, also known as the Age of Jackson. So it's politics in mid-19th century and a transition from the earlier period of Washington, Jefferson, Madison to a new era as we go further into the antebellum period. And what symbolizes this transition from one period to the next are these two gentlemen, John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. And if you look at John Quincy Adams, an excellent education with private tutors in Europe. He traveled with his father in Europe, and later he was an ambassador there as well. And a very long, experienced career in law and government. And, it goes all the way back to his childhood. He's just immersed in this kind of a world. And he's a person who just absolutely detested slavery, the treatment of Native Americans. He feels that they should be treated with dignity and respect. And, he has these ideals of equality, the rhetoric of the Declaration of Independence. A very dignified person, and, and another contrast with Andrew Jackson. Now, Jackson is really the opposite in every way. He was orphaned quite young, and he's very self-reliant, having to take care of himself. He fought in the Revolutionary War and later in the War of 1812, and he was a national hero coming out of that war. Self-made man, died rich from land sales. He really was able to ride a wave of property, rising property values in the West, and owned hundreds of slaves. Hated natives, wanted them off the land, and he's a very sort of violent, hot-tempered man. He was in a number of fights, duels. He'd killed people. He'd been shot himself as well. And he's got that hair. Now, what we have in a change, we look at the elections of 1812, 16, 20, 24. And we've got, the old system, the Federalists and the Republican Democrats, and 1816 still. But 1820, we've got that era of good feelings. Well, that just blows up in 1824 as the Democratic Party factioned into various different groups, and nobody coming out with a clear majority, and so the election having to go into the House of Representatives. And Clay, he's the orange guy here, Henry Clay, he teams up with John Quincy Adams to elect John Quincy Adams over Andrew Jackson, who felt that this was a corrupt bargain and very unfair towards him, as he had won the most, just not a majority. He felt he should have been the winner of this election, and he'll use this corrupt bargain as a campaign pledge in the 1828 election, and wins it quite easily. We can see here. And what had happened, and had been happening in all of the states during this time, from the era of good feelings up to this election, is broadening the amount of the qualifications to vote. So previously you would have had to have owned property. Now that's not necessarily a requirement in many states. Simply just being a citizen, white, male, would grant you the right to vote. And so you're getting people who before would not be allowed to vote, who can, and these are much more what we would call like the common people, wage earners, maybe a small property owner working on a farm but not necessarily owning it yourself, or working in a shop or one of these young factories. And so you're looking for a presidential candidate that will speak to you and for you. And Andrew Jackson was that person for many of them. He was very popular amongst the lower classes. Okay, now we're going to just look at the broader picture, 19th century, first to second party and beyond, with the party systems as they're known. The first party system was the Hamilton-Jefferson split into the Federalists and the Jefferson's Democratic Republicans, and the issue of, within the Constitution, where did power reside? Was it in the states or was it in the national government? And then that divide over foreign affairs with the French Revolution, whether or not to support France, support Britain, or stay neutral. Now that transitioned into the era of good feelings after the War of 1812, where there's nationalism, there's moderation of political views, and sort of an acceptance of the good from each of the systems. But then the election of 1824, it all blows up again, and it's going to emerge into the second party system. And this is sometimes known as the Age of Jackson. And you can see a number of issues: infrastructure, banks, slavery, expanding the country or not, tariffs, native policy. Which direction are you going to go there? How are you going to relate as a government to the Native Americans? And these issues, two sort of leaders emerge on each side: Clay, Henry Clay, and their party will dub themselves the Whigs, and Jackson, who's continuing on with Jefferson's Democratic Republican Party, which is now simply just called the Democrat Party. And same party that we have today, the Democrats. Of course, it's evolved considerably since the 1830s. The election of 1844 will be seen as another turning point in 19th century politics, with Henry Clay again versus a guy called Polk. And Clay sort of advocating improving the country qualitatively by building infrastructure, and Polk definitely an expansionist and campaigning on a promise to expand the country westward into the Pacific Ocean and California and Oregon. And this, with Polk wins, and with the expansion and the issue of expanding slavery, the whole thing just blows up again, and we'll go into another party system. Okay, Andrew Jackson's been elected, and he's taking on the mantle of Thomas Jefferson. Even though Thomas Jefferson strongly disliked Andrew Jackson's going to be saying, I'm the continuation of Thomas Jefferson. And supporters, a lot of farmers definitely supported Andrew Jackson, who had supported Thomas Jefferson. But in general, it's expanding beyond just farmers to artisans, wage earners as well. Who would each side say is, the chosen people? And Andrew Jackson thinks not just the farmers, the Yemen farmers, it's wage earners, artisans as well. Andrew Jackson would accept industrialization. He doesn't see government having any role in regulating the industrial economy, but certainly accepts it and champions, the wage earners in these young factories. The bank, Thomas Jefferson opposed it, but sort of changed his mind on it, saw it as useful and beneficial for the government. Andrew Jackson's going to be opposed to it, and he's going to brand it as a tool of the elite and of the North. And whether or not he believed that or not, his supporters certainly did. And this is a way to really stabilize your base of supporters by going against it. Protective tariffs are both opposed to this. Internal improvements, what we would call infrastructure today, both agreeing this is not the responsibility of the national government. Now, final point on the election of Andrew Jackson. When he came in, he said, to the victor goes the spoils, meaning you've won the presidency. You have that right to reward your supporters with government positions. And there's lots of government positions that the president can offer jobs to supporters. The post office is the most common one. There's the national government has to run the postal system, and that's lots of federal jobs throughout the country. But there's others as well. And this is definitely a change and a new sort of idea. So he initiates what we call the spoils system. And now their argument is that you're going to stop an aristocratic bureaucracy from forming within the government by bringing in fresh people all the time. But the detractors, and it's true, it leads to corruption. You vote for me or get, support me financially, or getting lots of people to come out and vote for me, and I can provide you with this lucrative job. And some of the jobs, government jobs, are very much open for corruption. The best one would be to be the customs collecting officer in the port of New York City, where you are responsible for collecting taxes, the tariff coming in. And it's very easily for you to, as we say, cook the books, cheat in the finances and pocket some money for yourself. And this is going to go on for quite some time of this kind of corruption within the U.S. government at all levels, the national government and at the state and city levels as well. And we're going to get what we call party machines forming, which are, well, we'll get to that in the future about how those work. And really, what symbolizes Jackson coming in to a lot of people is the inauguration party. The common man showed up to see their guy coming into office, and it broke out into a drunken sort of mob fest as they all swarmed into the White House. And the White House would have been probably just destroyed by this party if some smart person hadn't made the wise decision to move the barrels of whiskey out of the house and out onto the front lawn where the party then proceeded. Andrew Jackson's come on in, and we'll see in the next lecture how his policies as president created an organized opposition around Henry Clay, who will form their Whig party to oppose Andrew Jackson. And Whig, by the way, is a nickname for, in English politics, of people opposed to the king. And they're going to brand Andrew Jackson as King Jackson or King Andrew. All right, that concludes this lecture.